morning and welcome to Power Breakfast. I'm Pavitra Parekh. Those are the top headlines that we're looking at, and it's basically just a wait and watch till we hear from the Fed Chair Jerome Powell, later tonight at the Jackson Hole Summit. So all eyes really on that. But ahead of that, we did get a solid session from Wall Street. So all of the key indices rallied and were well in the green at the close. On the back of that, you have all of the Asian markets which have opened up with good gains. So let's take a look at some of those. The Japanese markets, the Nikkei index that is leading the gains this morning. That's up over 1%. You have Hang Seng on your screen seeing gains of 0.8%. Taiwan also doing well, almost 100 points higher. So that one is looking quite good. And for all of the Asian markets, whether it's a Kospi, Shanghai, Straits, all of those also seeing good gains. And so it's definitely a positive screen at the start of the trading session. Let's also bring up the SGX Nifty for you now. It's indicating that we'll have a good session, good opening for our markets rather. That is currently up 95 points, and that has moved up further in the past couple of minutes as well. But let's now talk about the rally that really led to Asia being this much higher. That is the rally that we saw on Wall Street. So we ended Thursday's trading session higher. The Dow Jones was up over 300 points. The S&P 500 rallied 1.4%, and the Nasdaq Composite was the outperformer. It surged over 1.7% at the close, actually. So we now have CNBC's Carl Quintanilla, who's standing by to get us all of the action from Wall Street.
Major averages closing higher across the board as investors look for clues from the Fed's annual Jackson Hole Summit. The Dow finishing up triple digits for a gain of just under 1%. The S&P ending over 1% higher on Wall Street. And the Nasdaq is the big winner again, closing out the session with a 1.6% gain. That Fed symposium in Jackson Hole is underway. The countdown is on to the Fed chair's speech tomorrow. Investors will be watching for any signs of future rate hikes and if Powell thinks that inflation is slowing down. Amazon striking a deal with fuel cell maker Plug Power to power some of its operations with green hydrogen. Shares of both companies ending the day higher as Amazon says the deal will help further its sustainability goals. And Peloton shares dropping 18%, losing all of its gains from yesterday after a disappointing report. The exercise equipment company forecasting further revenue declines, which has investors pushing the sell button. That is the action from the U.S. market. Back to you in Mumbai.
All right, Carl, thanks a lot for getting us all of that action from what has clearly been a solid session on Wall Street. But staying with the U.S., let's also bring you some important macro cues from Wall Street. U.S. jobless claims fall for the second straight week, and the initial jobless claims for the week ending on the 20th of August stood at 2,43,000 versus an estimate of 2,67,000. CNBC's Rick Santelli filed this report.
243,000 on initial jobless claims. Definitely better than expected, about 10,000 better than expected, at least till we see a revision. It's 7,000 less than 250,000 in the rearview mirror. 243,000 would be the best level since the week of July 22nd. Now, on continuing claims, 1,415,000, also better than expected. And sequentially, it's what, 22,000 below last week's until we see a revision. So 1,415,000 is the best level actually going back to mid-July, the July 15th week, and that was under 1.4 million.
All right, so that is on the jobless claims, but let's now talk about the big global market cue. The two-day Jackson Hole Symposium is underway, and investors await comments from Fed Chair Jerome Powell today on the rate hike trajectory, as well as the Fed's position on inflation. So CNBC's Steve Leisman spoke to Kansas City Fed President Esther George, Philadelphia Fed President Patrick Harker, as well as St. Louis Fed President James Bullard to get a sense of the central bank's stand on rate hikes, inflation, recessionary risks, and lots more. So let's listen into that.
So I think when we look at the economy today, we still see imbalances between demand and supply, and that's putting high inflation in play. So we still have high inflation. We saw some easing in the July numbers, but I think it remains broad-based, so there's more work to be done. Right now, we continue to hear number one concern is a tight labor market, difficulty finding people to work, and that price pressures are still there. They've seen some easing, I think, on supply constraints, but not enough that they can look ahead over the next year and think that isn't still going to be an issue for them. I think for this year, we have 3 more meetings. We know we still have more progress to make. And what I'm really looking for is to say, when do we see the turning point in inflation? When can we begin to see where that terminal rate might rest? Because I don't think we know yet where that may have to settle out, but it will be higher than it is today for sure. Obviously, doing 75 in June and July sets a pace that I think the public is looking for. What changes that would cause you to step down? And I think certainly at some point getting to a steadier, more sustainable pace is going to be important. So I think it's too soon to say, you know, what should we expect in September, because we have some important data that's coming up.
I don't know exactly yet because the data needs to let that play out. But we need to get to a restrictive stance, which we'll do by the end of the year. And then we need to see how things turn out. That is, we don't need to rush way up and then way down. We need to go up and sit for a while and let things play out. We talk about long and variable lags. We actually have to believe it and let this play out a little bit. So I want to see the next reading and then decide.
Next inflation reading?
Yeah, next inflation reading. That said, I want to put this in a bit of a historical context. Since 1983, the Fed has raised rates 86 times. 75 of those were under 50 basis points. And I think we have to recognize that a 50 basis point move is still a substantial move. So whether it's 50 or 75, I can't say right now, but let's not think that 75 is not a substantial move, 50 is a substantial move. I think right now, in terms of policy, we need to get inflation under control no matter what. And so I don't know if it matters a whole lot whether we call it a recession or not technically. It is an odd recession if it were a recession, right? Given the job market, the strength of the job market. So I don't think we can call it a recession, but that's not my job. That's the NBER's job.
I think I said 375 to 4 is my target for this year, for the end of this year. And I like the front loading. I like the idea that you get the rate increases in earlier rather than later. We've got inflation right now. We've got a strong labor market right now. It seems like a good time to get to the right neighborhood for the funds rate. I think the front-loading idea is that you, first of all, you show you're serious about inflation fighting, and you want to get up to the level that will put downward pressure on inflation. And we're at 233 right now. You know, that's not high enough to be serious about putting downward pressure on inflation. Market has helped us a lot. There's been a lot of pre-pricing during the spring and the summer here. But we have to get our policy rate to where it needs to be to put downward pressure on inflation. Well, of course, we have two sides to the mandate, and we have a labor market side. And if the labor market was very disturbed, that would enter into our calculation. So that's important. I don't think recessions are all that predictable. There are models out there that try to do something, but they don't do that great of a job. And when you think about the big recessions that we've had recently, the pandemic or the global financial crisis, those were essentially unpredictable events. I wouldn't go overboard on that, but they're hard to predict events. So yes, of course, we're taking recession risk, and there is recession risk out there in the future, but I don't think we know that there's going to be a recession one way or the other.
All right, extremely interesting to hear from all of the individual state presidents on what, the Fed's rate hike trajectory could look like, and what is the best approach perhaps to tackle the challenges that we have on hand of inflation as well as these recessionary risks. But of course, we're waiting for the Fed chair to speak tonight at the Jackson Hole Summit. With that, let's move on and bring you our last update from the global market wrap. European markets ended Thursday's trading session marginally higher. So the pan-European stocks was up 0.3%. The German DAX index saw a rise of around 50 points at the close, and the British FTSE was up around 8 points. Now, stronger than expected growth data from Germany led stocks higher despite the energy crisis in Europe, and Germany's second quarter GDP rose just around 0.1% over the previous quarter, but this is against the estimates of flat growth, which was for this period. Again, all of this is, amid earlier stagnation fears. The economy grew 1.7% year over year, also above estimates. Meanwhile, minutes from the ECB's July meeting show that policymakers are increasingly concerned about high inflation getting entrenched amid all of these recession risks that we've been talking about in the Eurozone. So that's an important update to track as well from Europe. But with that, let's also bring you another important cue that we're focusing on this morning, that is crude oil prices. After rallying hard, Brent crude has now slipped back below $100 a barrel in a volatile session as the market braces for a possible return of sanctioned Iranian oil supply. Now, worries over the interest rates also rising in the United States and their impact on demand also drove the prices lower. So that's something else that we're tracking. For now, we do have crude, which is below $100 a barrel again. With that, we are going to get into a short break on this show, but you don't go anywhere. As always, on the other side, we'll bring in our research team, and they're going to tell you about all of the cues that you should keep on. Welcome back. You're still tuned into Power Breakfast. Now, as promised, let's take you through all of the cues and the stocks that you should have on your radar as we get into a brand new trading session, the last one for this week. So we have Sonia and Mangalam joining us now with the trade setup. Guys, a very good morning to both of you. And let's come to you, Sonia, first. We were just going through the global setup, and you know, it is going to be a lot about that, of course, ahead of the Jackson Hole Summit, but the market's looking quite positive.
It is. The SGX Nifty is up almost about 90 odd points. The Dow had a very strong run overnight. In fact, SGX now up almost 100 points. The Dow was up about 320 points as well. All eyes will be on the Jackson Hole meeting that takes place later today. Fed Chair Jerome Powell's speech as well will be keenly watched. The investors are expecting the Fed to reiterate its stance to slow inflation with rate hikes. So that's the key expectation this time around. For our own markets, yesterday was a bit of a down day, but FIs bought into the markets. They bought almost 370 odd crores, while DII sold 330 odd crores. The Nifty has been holding on to the 20-day moving average, so some key levels are holding on the downside. Although this is a buy on dips market, yesterday was a bit different. The Nifty ended 200 points off the day's highs yesterday. It's a start of a new series today. Let's see how things shape up. But for now, looks like the market will definitely start well in the green.
All right, a start well in the green. So let's see how we go from there. But Sonia, also take us through some of the individual stocks that we should keep on our radar today.
So I'm watching out for a couple of pharma stocks. Dr. Reddy tops the list. They've received an establishment inspection report from the US FDA for the Andhra Pradesh facility. So that's positive news flow for Dr. Reddy's. Gland Pharma has received a Form 483 with one observation for a medical device. So some bit of negative news flow over there. Nykaa has done an exclusive tie-up with the hair care brand Anomaly in India. So that's a business update there. Gautam Adani will be launching the open offer for ACC and Ambuja today, so do keep an eye out on that. Nelco has signed an agreement with Intelsat Commercial Aviation to offer in-flight connectivity in India's airspace, so that could mean an order for more business for Nelco. HOEC, there's a board meeting scheduled on the 30th to consider fundraising, and a couple of brokerage calls that I'm watching out for. Jefferies has initiated a buy on delivery with a target price of 775. They say it's a play on India's fast-growing e-commerce space and formalization of logistics, so big upside to the current market price. And UBS has downgraded Eicher Motors after the big run that we've seen. They've raised their target price, though, to 36.50. They say that the downgrade is post the rally in the stock as well as the high expectations. Back to you.
All right, Sonia, thanks a lot for that. We're going to keep all of these stocks on our radar today. Finally, let's also bring Mangalam in, who's looking at all of the cues from the futures and options space. Mangalam, how is it looking as we get into the September series?
Well, it's the start of a new series, so what do we say? We say, hello, September. Well, September is known to be a series with big moves. If you just take a look at the last three September series itself, the last one saw a 981 or near 1,000-point move on the index. We had the September before that, we declined by about 750 points, and September 2019 as well, we did see a rally of almost 620 points on the Nifty. The Nifty is sitting on big gains. In fact, in just the last two series, the Nifty has gained almost 1,700 odd points, 600 points in the July-August series and 1,150 points in the July series itself. So let's see whether that momentum sustains or not. What has sustained, though, however, is the conviction, because the rollovers between August and September have been 82%, and this compares with around 76.5% on a 3-month average basis. And as a result of which, the Nifty open interest at the start of the series too is at around 1.06 crores, and this compares with the last couple of series being around just under 1 odd crore mark. So, the important part, however, is that despite the rally that we've seen over the last couple of series, the FIs have trimmed their positions, and they start the September series on a relatively weaker footing from a bullish standpoint. So 35% long exposure. This compares with 65% short exposure that they have at the start of this series itself. Remember, July, they started with 15% longs, and we saw an 1,100-point rally out there. 57% long in August. We saw a 500, 600-point rally. Let's see where the September series goes, given it is known for big moves. So what are the triggers that can cause that big moves? The first one, any commentary coming in from the Fed chair today, and any commentary coming in from all the other global central banks, that will be big. The other things we'll be watching out for, macro developments in Europe as well as China, because that are now coming to the fore, the energy crisis, etc. The third thing we'll be watching out for, global market sentiment, how that pans out, and to that is linked crude as well as the dollar index. The US FOMC meet, which is currently underway, we will hear from Fed Chair tonight as well, and FII flows will be the other thing we'll be watching out for, because they've been sporadic over the last couple of trading sessions. And as we move towards the festive season, September is usually the precursor to that. Any pre-festive season business and the way the monsoon has spread would give an inkling into how demand will pan out in the second half of this year, which accounts for majority of the consumption.
All right, it'll definitely be interesting to see how this series pans out. Mangalam, thanks a lot for taking us through all of those cues. But with that, let's also move on and bring you some more important updates that came through overnight. In some important news to track, the government has tweaked its policy to ban the export of wheat flour. Now, remember, the centre had in July made the export of wheat flour subject to approval from an inter-ministerial committee, but a significant amount of wheat flour continued to be exported, which has actually led to this measure by the government. So that's the latest that we're tracking as far as the government banning wheat flour exports. There's more news that came through, and this is when Telecom Minister Ashwini Vaishnav has said that 5G services in India will be launched by the 12th of October. He also promised that 5G coverage will be available across the country in a few years' time and rates will be quite affordable. So let's listen in to his comments.
In telecom, we have developed this PM Gati Shakti ROW portal, in which all the state governments have now joined. All the major infrastructure ministries like railways, like highways, they have all joined this common portal, and now anybody who wants to install a tower, install a pole, lay fiber, they can all apply on one common portal.
Interesting conversation as part of our India at 75 series. My colleague Mangalam spoke to Pidilite's MD Bharat Puri as well as Ogilvy's Piyush Pandey on the playbook that global enterprises need to adopt while setting up a business for the Indian audience. So listen in to that conversation.
India is clearly a country where you cannot do a cut, copy, paste from anywhere else, because frankly, India itself is not one homogeneous country.
Exactly.
We're a set of, and we can keep debating how many countries. But India's diversity is something that you have to cognize of when you explain to fellows that, listen, the average good marketer advertises in 6 to 8 languages. For most people, it's a complete shock. I mean, how can that? And at times, when you're advertising, you're doing it with different castes, so on. As far as the India playbook is concerned, my simple thing is the people who've thought global and acted local are the fellows over a period of time have understood and got India. This is a market which has the size and complexity of a large market, but has the revenues, at least in the initial years, of a small market. And therefore multiplying number of consumers into usage occasions and hoping this is the potential market, that just suggests naivety.
And a lot of learning has also happened to them, to a lot of new companies, when they see the likes of Fevicol.
Right.
Because they said it's so Indian and it appeals to a carpenter, to Ratan Tata at the same time.
There is no other country in the world where a glue brand is one of the top 10 consumer brands. Not top 10 adhesive or top 10 chemical. It's the top 10 consumer brands in the country. And that tells you a lot about India, the country, and how to win in India. And this is something a lot of times it takes a lot of experience to understand.
Every new technology is an enabler for you to take your idea to your audience. Never be scared of technology. At the same time, never forget that you need an idea. Technology cannot save you. देखो कंप्यूटर में झांकोगे तो डेटा दिखेगा, नजरें ऊपर उठाओगे तो दुनिया दिखेगी.
All right, interesting chat there, and you can watch the entire conversation with Bharat Puri and Piyush Pandey all day today only on CNBC-TV18. Okay, with that, let me also move on and bring you some more global updates. Wednesday marked the first time that India voted against Russia in the Security Council after Ukrainian President Zelensky addressed a meeting via video conferencing. India, remember, had so far abstained on voting on Ukraine-related issues, inviting a lot of criticism from Western powers, even as New Delhi has repeatedly called on Ukraine and Russia to engage in diplomacy and dialogue in order to end the war. Remember, India is a temporary member of the UN Security Council for a 2-year term, which ends in December this year. So this is an important development to track as well. With that, we're out of time, but let me quickly run you through what's happening as far as the Asian markets go. It is completely in the green right now. Nikkei leading the gains, up around 1%. Hang Seng is on your screen, 0.8% higher there. Taiwan also around 0.7% in the green. So across the board, Asia reflecting all of the gains that we saw on Wall Street. And the SGX Nifty will come up for you. That is indicating a good gap up start for our own markets. We're almost 100 points higher on the SGX Nifty. So thanks a lot for tuning into Power Breakfast. Bazaar Morning Call comes up next.